Cadwork theory, you will have access to what we call scenes. The scenes are a way for you to set visibility, meaning you can actually assign element to one or several scenes at once. This way, when you click on the scene, you will actually display the element assigned to it. So how does scene work? First thing is, here at the bottom, you have a plus sign that you will also find here on the far right corner that allow you to create a new scene. Let's call it, for example, front deck. When you create a scene like this, you can see that there is several colors that are used. This depends on the way the elements are assigned to that scene. To know a bit more about the current setting of your scene, simply right-click on its icon. By default, according to my specific settings, my scene saves all visible elements when I first generate the scene. If I want to change its content, what I can do is simply select the group of elements I would like to display, right-click on the scene, and override the scene. Of course, I could have indeed generated the scene with this view directly. So now I can easily go from one scene to another. Again, different colors are used. Here, for example, this is the blue color. As you see here, you can choose to add new elements automatically to your scene. It could be always. So every time you add a new element, no matter which scene is active at the moment, it will be added to this specific scene. Second option is when active, so you will only add elements to that scene when the scene is actually activated. So this will be a purple scene. So here, if I were to add an element, or simply if I were to add an element, let's say 6y minus 4 feet, here this element is added, of course, to the scene. But as you can see, it was also added to the glue lamp scene. The reason for that is that this scene, a blue one, is set to add elements based on their attributes. The first time you will use this on a scene, you will first need to select which attribute to take into account. In this case, we add material. As soon as you select an attribute, you will see here all the possible values for that specific attribute in this file, not only the ones that are currently in use. So here, for example, we could add glue lamp. More than one attribute can be selected in this view. If you change the setting, it will always ask you if you would like to update the scene or not. Let's go yes. In our case, it didn't change anything since all glue lamps were already added to that specific scene. When you right-click on a scene, you will see that there is a bit more option that can actually be saved. Display graphic mode, meaning that this will actually save the graphic mode that was used when you saved the scene. If you want to change that, simply overwrite as we just did. And now, no matter which representation is used, when you will go back in this scene, it will call for this specific representation mode. Always display view allows you to actually zoom in directly on the saved orientation. For example, if you would like to have a scene for this detail, what we could do is select this element, create a scene with only the active element saved inside, so yes, and pose base. Here, I would like always to have this visibility when accessing this scene, so I can right click. So here, if we would like to retrieve exactly this view with this zoom, I will check the first two options and override the scene. Then, no matter the orientation or the element visible, it will automatically zoom on that location. The last option here allows you actually to not only have the same orientation with the always display view, but also the same as clicking this icon here, zoom all, meaning that all elements currently assigned to the scene will be on display and not outside. So here if we were to simply change this and a zoom, post base, orientation and zoom out. This allows you to always keep new elements inside your view. Meaning, for example, here, if we are in, let's say, always add new element, zoom on scene. This means that if I add a new element, even a copy of this one, for example, here, just as an example, and we go back to post base, you see that the zoom has changed because the content has changed. So this can be pretty useful. This last option here is a way for you to actually assign what we call the ref switch. So the ref switch, this concept is not really related to the scene, but could be something nice to actually assign to a scene. Let's say that we have two main orientation in this project. Here, as you can see, I'm orthogonal to my system axis. That's pretty neat. But what if I had a secondary structure in this model with a different orientation? In order to be able to use the X and Y and Z axis that makes copy, move, and a lot of other options so much easier, how can we actually orient the model accordingly? So let's just add a copy of this model in a different orientation. And here we go. So now again, this element, as you can see, is not aligned with the current system axis. So we won't really be able to use the XYZ direction to work efficiently in this part of the model. So by actually using the ref switch or the option below to rotate the cursor, we will be able actually to set a new reference. So let's use this one. So here, the first thing is to orient the x-axis. So we are going to keep the same logic, so from here to there. And then the y-axis, always perpendicular. And if we move from x to y, means that z will be upward. If we select the y in clockwise direction according to x, z will be pointing downward. So let's keep the same orientation. So now, as you can see, the model has actually switched and is now aligned with the cursor. The difference with the secondary option is instead of having a rotation of your model like this, it's only the cursor that rotates. As you can see here with this second option that is set exactly in the same way we just did, the model stays fixed, but the cursor changed, and here you have in the bottom left corner, you will see the new axis system. Let's go back in ref switch. So this option can be only saved once, so you have only one choice. But you can actually assign a specific ref switch to a scene. We are going to assign this element to a new scene, and in this model we are going to save the ref switch. Let's overwrite this. So now, by doing this, it allows you to work normally in one ref switch, and as soon as you go back in another scene, you directly load the new orientation, as you can see here. The benefit for that is you can actually assign one ref switch per scene, so you can have a lot of different reference by doing so. If you don't assign them to scenes, you can only have one ref switch available in your 3D. The other options that you have below are simply a way for you to add element from the scene. So it means that here we are referencing in add to the display. So you can actually add the element in your 3D simply by right clicking on this or with shift right click. You can display the view, so it basically it doesn't load the scene but activate the view for that scene. So this is Alt middle click, and you retrieve the view but not the actual content of the scene. Recall scene plus view. So here it's just the same as actually going back to the scene. Hide elements to hide the element assigned to the scene, of course. And then here you can save the view directly, or save the active elements to the scene, change your views, add active elements to the scene. So that is pretty straightforward. You can also delete the scene by using this button. If you would like to be able to delete the scene simply by a press on the delete key. For this, you will need to go in Tools, Check and Query, in order to change specific default Cadwork behavior. This has to be used with caution, and you need to be aware of what you are doing before doing any changes in these windows. If you do have any doubt, simply restore for the standard settings. So here in Scene, General, Delete Scene, ask before each function. So when you repress delete, it will ask, would you like to delete the scene, yes or no, with the default values as yes, this with the default value as no, so that you will check with the right click. And in my case, I set it to always, meaning that I can easily clean my scenes. Among other ways to deal with the scene, this is something that has been added in version 30, and this is what you see here with these color tabs. These actually are not scenes, they are simply group of scenes. If I remove this group, the scenes are independent, but by dragging one on top of another, it generates a group. So you can simply add more scene to that group. For example, here it's simply different type of elements. So let's call this one, for example, right click, rename, type. So you can change the name or the color of the scene. When you activate a scene and you keep your cursor inside the scene tab, you can use the arrow key to move from one scene to another and load its settings or the views. If you have a group, such as type here, you can reduce the group with the bottom arrow key or expand the group with the top arrow key in order for you to access the scene inside. Or you can simply reduce it if you want to skip directly this group and go to the next. Another interesting option with the scene is the ability to assign specific list settings to the scene, meaning that you can actually export easily a list of that scene content. To do so, simply click here on the three dots and assign your list settings. You can set it for a production list and or a part list. Since these two lists will be named the same way, we recommend here to add a prefix to differentiate them. So production list and here timber list. And for you to be able to actually export these lists, even though you are not in that specific scene or if the elements are not even on screen, when you go to export list, production list, you have here access to export scenes list. By clicking here on the gears, you have access to different settings for free overwriting of existing list or not, and even be able to change the list format. CWLM is a default list format in Cadwork 3D. You will then you are also able to export CSV, XLSX file, or text file directly. And by clicking in here, you will have access to all the different scenes with available production list. If you want to export one, simply check the box and export. If you are working in a project in which you've added a lot of scene that you would like to keep and use for your next project, what you could do is either save an init, so a new init file based on the one you have here. But if you didn't want to save every new settings or attributes in this init, but only the scene, what you can do is simply by going in Help, Information, and accessing here your user profile location. You want to go here in Init and open the current init you are working with. You can even copy it if you like. In our init, we already have a certain amount of scene that have been some preset and other not, that will be added only when active, that you can delete if you don't want to keep them. And here the idea will be to load all these scenes from your previous file into this one. So to import scene in an existing file, so in your init or any other 3D currently open, go to File, Settings, and here at the bottom, Scenes. You can either search in the current folder, in the case where you want to load settings from another 3D available in the same folder as this one, or from your user profile. This means from the init available in your user profile. In our case, we are changing an init, so it won't change anything. So we will need to go through our computer to load the setting from the other file currently open. You will then here have the ability to either overwrite or merge the settings, meaning that by merging you actually keep the scenes that you already have available. So here let's go with overwrite and OK. We have now found the other 3D file, so we just select it and open. So now all the scenes have been added with all the different options, including the list export and all other settings. The scene tab at the bottom by default is at the bottom of the screen. Using this icon on the left side, you can actually undock it to place on another screen if you'd like, or even to place a different location, left, right side, or the top of your screen. To change the default setting used when you first create a scene, you can simply here click on the gears and change the setting to your liking. And this is it about the scene. Thank you for watching and see you soon.